Welcome, everybody, to the Inner Carnivore Podcast, episode 18, with my special guest, Robyn Lindars, aka Grill Girl, for anybody that has seen her on social media. Before I get into it with Robyn, whether you guys are listening on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, or watching the full video on YouTube, you guys could do a huge favor. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review where applicable. It really helps us out. And thank you guys for tuning in. That being said, how are you doing, Robyn?
Hey, Jason. Thank you for having me. I'm doing so awesome. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well. Very well. Got through the crazies of the holidays. Finally getting back into a little bit of a flow. And yeah, so I'm super glad we could put this together. For anybody who doesn't know Robyn, Grill Girl, super awesome barbecue stuff. I actually didn't have any idea of like what type of diet that you adhered to when I first started following you. I was just like, oh, she makes some really cool barbecue videos. And then I like started following you more and you started posting some stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, like I don't have a ton of experience in barbecue, but I have seen like some reality shows, like I've seen some like cooking shows. And I swear every single barbecue person who has ever been a part of barbecue, and this is no offense to anybody who's not, like you look like the typical barbecue person. Like they're not exactly the healthiest. They do not cook with the best ingredients as far as like health.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait a minute, like I don't understand. So how long have you been like into barbecue and how did you get started?
These are all good questions, and you're so right. I am like definitely your atypical barbecue person. I am here to break all the stereotypes, first and foremost, just because I'm a chick, because we just don't have enough women grilling, you know? And so really what happened was, so I have a journalism degree, and I've always loved to write, and I didn't always find a way to make a career out of that, but I guess I did with the blog over time. So one night on a whim and a couple glasses of Pinot Grigio, and this is back in the early days of blogging. Instagram did not exist, so I don't want to date myself, but I started a blog, and this was like on like .blogspot.com. So, and it was really just a way to document recipes I tried that turned out really well, and just to really just kind of expand on my writing, my love for writing. And this was right around the same time that I discovered grilling. And this actually happened by pretty much accidentally almost singeing my eyebrows off on my husband's grill. And I think a lot of people are in this situation. Let's just say, for example, you have an old grill, you buy like a crappy, no offense to charbroil, or like, you know, an entry level throwaway grill that you may use a couple times a year. The gas starter's burned out. You go to use it. You've had the gas on for a long time. When it finally does light, you get like a big flame ball effect. And that's exactly what happened to me. And I was like, what the hell just happened? You know? And I was like, all I want to do is just grill some chicken, you know? And so that happened. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to buy now he was my husband. He was my boyfriend at the time. I bought him a really nice Weber Genesis. I call that my gateway grill. And so this was before pellet smokers were a thing. Again, dating myself. And which I think for a lot of women, pellet smokers are their gateway grill because they're essentially like a glorified oven that adds smoke flavor. And and because I got my husband this expensive grill, I was like, I'm going to use this grill all the time. And then I realized, why are more women not grilling? Like, okay, clearly the dudes don't want to share because they realize it's a lot of fun. I get to hang out, I get to grill stuff, drink beer, and be outside. And then I realized, you know, the women are specifically missing out because this is a great way to eat healthy. It's a great way to eat low carb. It's a great way to create a lot less dishes than when you cook inside. And so that's really how Grill Girl came to be, was just me wanting to evangelize grilling to more women. And I even started hosting women's grilling clinics in my backyard, which I recently picked back up again. And I have another one I'm going to do in March because I really do want to be the change that I see. And this kind of turned into its own thing because I started doing a lot of recipe development for brands. then my dad had gotten into like barbecue and grilling at the same time, like a little bit before me. I actually had gotten him one of Stephen Reichland's first books on grilling for Father's Day one year. And then as time progressed one year, I got him a big green egg for Father's Day, which is a really kick-ass present to get for anyone or for anyone to receive. And so we kind of progressed on our journey together. And then he got into competition barbecue. I started doing it with him. It was like we would go to barbecue like events and competitions as our father-daughter bonding thing. But truth be told, competition barbecue, like, yes, I still do it. And I'm on the shed competition team, which is a whole hog team. But really, what's close and near and dear to my heart is grilling, healthy eating. I wrote a cookbook back in 2019, and it was about electric smoking because that was the opportunity that came to me. But the slant on the book was healthy electric smoking, and all the recipes can be used on any smoker, honestly. But with paleo and keto swap outs, because I'd always look at me, right? I'm not your typical dude. I'm not your typical person in the world of barbecue, which is, let's be honest, an overweight dude with a beard and a big ass beer belly. And you're right. And, it always surprises me because like you can eat a ton of smoked meat or grilled meat and not get fat. So I think maybe it's just the rest of their diet is so unhealthy. You know what I mean? Like we know, like you can eat a very protein forward diet and really not put weight on, but it must be the side of Doritos that you might pick up on the way home or whatever, and so, or, a side of mac and cheese or whatever that might be that goes with it. But so that's the low carb and healthy eating has always been really near and dear to my heart. And when I discovered specifically, there was a book that was kind of the precursor to the Whole30 movement written by Melissa Hartwig called It Starts With Food. That's when my brain started to realize like, okay, it's not just about me eating for just to maintain, like, so I can still fit into my jeans. Really, it's about eating for health. And that's when I started learning about GMOs and pesticides and like, oh, you know what? When I consume things like Splenda, that's bad for me, So then it kind of really took on another layer of complexity. And, it's been a fun ride. I'm really more known for grilling. If you look at my feed, it's very recipe driven, but I drop a lot of food red pills in the stories and in the captions too. So just because I've red pilled myself so much, and I think still the average person doesn't really realize what's in the food they're eating. And just sadly how toxic everything is, and that you really do have to read labels and understand how our food system works so that you can protect your family. Because everything that's out there is just like loaded in toxins. I kind of have this warrior mindset, like, the FDA is not going to protect you. The government's definitely not going to protect you. And you've got to look out for yourself. So when you go to the grocery store, like have that in your mind that like everything there is food marketing, right? Like, and you have to read past that. It's like food propaganda, right? And I myself we've all been a victim of this. Like, I don't want to date myself, but like I'm 45. Like I lived before the internet, when I was in my teens, I was a teenage girl, always on a different diet. And let's remember the low fat craze where they said, eat whatever you want as long as it's low in fat. So you're like, oh my gosh, this bagel has no fat. This yogurt has no fat. These Snackwell chocolate cookies have no fat. I can eat the whole box. Like, you know what I mean? Like we've been fed so much bullshit over the years. So I think I've finally wisened up, and now my bullshit meter is very finely tuned. And thank God for the internet, because there is so much information out there that we can really eat to protect ourselves, knowing what we know now.
Yeah, no,
But that was a very long-winded intro.
No, that's perfect. Like, and it brings to light a lot of things, because even subconsciously, like, I haven't been into food hardcore, but I was an athlete in college, and then a personal trainer and a very, very amateur bodybuilder in my 20s, and so food has always been a part of that, right? And even subconsciously, if you were to ask me, why are these people on these barbecue shows fat? I'd be like, oh, because they eat. Look what they're cooking. They eat that every day, right? And like without even thinking about it. That's just subconsciously what I would have said. And now I'm like, I literally eat more meat than they do. Like I guarantee you I eat more meat than they do.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not what and you can't really say it's the stuff they put on it, because even if they're doing sugar barbecue, the amount of sugar in the barbecue sauce that gets on the food that they actually eat is pretty dang low. So you're like, okay, there has to be something else. And that's the crazy thing, because I don't want to say I've been red pilled for a while, but I've had a healthy distrust of a lot of things for a number of years. And that was like the last thing to go, right? The last thing to go was this nutrition aspect of it, where you're like, maybe everything they're telling us is not exactly true. And then you start getting to it, and then it's just like rabbit holes. And
Yes.
yeah, and a couple
Lots
things
of
that we've
holes.
talked about is, so before we dive deep into the rabbit hole, how do you handle the standard barbecue scene, knowing that you're still a healthy love of meat like everybody else, but I have a hard time imagining that there's a whole lot of people that have your views on the rest of it when it comes to barbecue. So how has that been? How's navigating that, or are you able to keep that pretty separate, if that makes sense?
It's funny because, and that's how I can even get into my red pilling of myself about meat that we'll talk about. But I love learning about the different ways to smoke meat. I love the process. I love going to barbecue competitions and seeing my friends there. And then there is kind of this dichotomy of like, um, and think about what the stuff you do for competitions is like not real life. You know what I mean? Like I might be there for a couple days, but even then I'm like, if I meet someone who works for a pork company, I'll be like, so how do you feel about GMO corn and feeding your pigs that, or you know what I mean? And I'll just like, cause I just can't let it go, so it does produce a little bit of um, friction. I think for me, I've evolved as a brand and red pilled myself to the point where now, like let's just say 4 years ago, I had a sponsorship with Smithfield and I had no idea what a shitty company they were at the time. And that was like 4 years ago. Right. And so, fast forward now, I'm really happy to know, like, really, like, at the time when I had it, I appreciated just having a paid sponsorship, right? But now, where I am now, I would never work with a company who treats their animals that way, knowing what I know now. But let's just say, for example, only a year ago did I even learn about the fact that, like, in 25 states, it's legal to feed pigs garbage. And did I lose you, Jason?
Nope, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. I didn't see your screen anymore. I'm like, what happened to him? And so like there's something called the Swine Protection Act, which sounds like it's protecting the swine, but it's not really. It just says that you have to heat the garbage to a certain temperature before you feed it to them. And Smithfield is one of the biggest perpetrators of feeding their pigs garbage, which is why people are finding things like microplastic in their hot dogs. Because let's face it, I don't know if you ever saw that video that went viral on TikTok, and it was a guy, and of course he worked at a Smithfield plant in North Carolina, which is my original home state, which is a big hog state, and they're literally feeding the pigs garbage. But the point is that they don't even bother. They're supposed to have like a um, machine that removes the bags of plastic before they feed the pigs garbage, but of course it doesn't work correctly, and the pigs are literally ingesting plastic bags. And so anyway, I think what's happened for me is that I've gotten to a point as a brand where I've been able to really plant my stake in the ground, and if anyone, and when people come to me with opportunities, I'm like, okay, well, do you use nitrates? What do you feed your animals? Things like that, right? And so, yes, it lessens the amount of brands I might work with, but at least I can sleep at night knowing what I know. You know what I mean? So, I think that also gives me some street cred when I go on my feed and say, this is Grill Girl approved. People know that I have asked them the tough questions because, there's a lot of gross stuff out there and I don't want to ingest it. And, and it's not even just what's the pig eating or the cow eating, but like, how are they treated, and that's, if you are what you eats, you want to just know all of these things. And I'm not saying I don't go to Costco here and there and buy steaks from there, because I do, but I try to at least endorse companies that I feel good about eating as being Grill Girl approved.
Yeah.
So, but yes, it can create some friction, because let's face it, the people with the money are the brands with the money that do the sponsorships are the ones that are not doing things the way they're the ones that are raising their animals in like a CAFO environment or feeding their pigs trash. Let's be honest. Those are the big corporations with money to spend on influencers and sponsorships. And those are the people that I don't want to work with.
So it does.
It's like, okay, let me make myself broke here, but at least I can sleep at night. Well, you know what I mean? It's like, but it also feels good that I'm not dependent on like working with brands that I, feel dirty about working with, so there's that.
Yeah, it's the social justice warrior athlete who signs $1 billion contract with Nike and then goes, I'm just going to pretend like there's no child labor stuff happening in China. Like, yeah, so I totally get that, but
Right.
from a normal person's standpoint, like we don't even think about that. Like, I grew up around farms. Like we had, a cow or two at times. We had goats and chickens, and so growing up, like it was just normal. They feed on grass. You feed them hay every once in a while. Like you might get them some grain, towards the end of their life cycle to fatten them up a little bit. Like chickens just roam around. And so you don't even think about like factory farming. Like that's a huge one. And honestly, that's one that I don't even, I like to get into it with vegans a lot. That's one I don't even touch with vegans, because I'm like, we can talk about factory farming, provided you think it's okay to still eat the animals, but factory farming is a problem, right?
Yeah.
Like most factory farming practices. So how does a normal person, like, because you're in the food world, right? Like you talk to these brands, you know what happens. How does a normal person navigate? What do I eat? What do I not eat? Because at the end of the day, if you really want to like align, like you got to go to some of these companies that are, beef is $15 a pound. And you're like, I align with this company, but I cannot afford to spend $15 a pound every time I eat beef. So how does the normal person navigate like trying to do as best as they can?
That's a great question, because and I'll admit, people send me a lot of free meat, so I'm lucky, right? But I'm not your average person. And not all of that meat is always going to be it's not always going to be grass fed. Sometimes I'm sure it is on a CAFO, right? Like, so I think you just do the best you can, because honestly, these days with food prices, that's just what you have to do, because it's not just food prices. Everything's going up. Gas is going up. Like the cost of living is up, up, up. So I think you do the best you can with what you're given. And for me, it's kind of like a mix. Like, yes, I hit Costco, but yes, I also am a member of a local food buyers club, and I try to support them too. And like, and it's kind of like a mix, like special occasions, I'll buy stuff from them. I'll try to buy some veggies here and there, but I'm going to probably stock up on, organic chicken thighs from Costco, but then maybe buy beef from them. And I think it's just like a balance, you know what I mean? And you just do the best you can, like, and then you throw kids into the mix, and that's hard, right? Because kids are picky AF. At least even my kid, who I consider not picky, is picky. He's like, I can't eat this chicken salad because someone put raisins in it. And I'm like, okay, whatever, or this bread doesn't have the crust cut off. What am I going to do? It's just like, so you do the best with it. But I think like, for me, I know which brands I feel like are healthy enough that I feel okay for my kid to eat. And I know where I can find the best prices for that, like where my kid doesn't eat fully carnivore. He does eat a sandwich, but I try to make sure that it's organic bread. So I know it's not loaded in glyphosate, and then I put it with a meat stick, and I make sure it's really like, so, it's kind of a balance. And I think you do have to, in today's environment, read labels, understand who has the best deals, and also just like know that it's not going to be perfect. And you're right, you can't afford to only buy those kind of companies just because, unfortunately, the way the cost of living is. So I think you just do the best you can, honestly. You
Yeah.
can find even a grass-fed beef type. It's gotten so much more. I think you like places like Costco. I swear they should make me an ambassador. And some people might be like, "Oh my gosh, she's plugging Costco." But like, let's say your average person buys a lot of stuff there because they have good deals, right? Like you can get the Chosen Foods mayo, the big jar, for like $10, and the small jar at my local grocery store is like $9 for like half the size jar that you can get at Costco, right? So it's like, where you get the deals on like the organic stuff, and then you just do the best you can. And you might not even, if you're like me, you might not even have time to drive to all the places with the best deals, because I live in BFE and I'm 45 minutes away from Costco, or, so I just try to, with your own means, to do the best you can, read your labels, and, and some people can garden. I am hit or miss with my gardening, but you can grow like your salad if you eat salad, right? And some of your salad greens and some things like that to supplement, So that's what I'm trying to do, is like balance. Like I know when I talk to people, not everyone's like, okay, I can afford this or that, but it's good to just know and be aware, because I think half of the battle is just knowing and asking. Like I think these food brands also are making changes because they have to make changes, because people are starting to ask for that. You know what I mean? Like, and I can even say that historically, before I quit my day job to do Grill Girl full time, I used to work for a social media analytics company that basically listened to all the online data and companies, let's say like big companies like the milk producers of the world wanted to see what people were saying about things like ractopamine in milk, and we're starting to be conscious of that. And then they'll ask for, I'd like milk without ractopamine, and that tells those brands, consumers want this, we need to change. You know what I mean? So we can be the change collectively when we start making our voices known. I know it feels like we're swimming upstream battles here with the prices, but there is, in all things, not just the food system, power in numbers. So there's that.
For sure. And so I want to get into that glyphosate. That's Roundup, correct? That's the chemical that's in Roundup.
Yes.
For the normal person, because they're like, what's this glyphosate? It's literally Roundup. Like, I mean, anybody who's used Roundup knows what it does to living things. Like,
right.
It makes it go bye-bye.
Yep.
And so we've talked a little bit of this. I want your take on glyphosate, crops and vegetables that are used with it, and then animals and how all of that translates.
Absolutely. And so I have to ask you a question. Have you ever red pilled yourself like really hard and lost sleep?
To a point. So I stopped red pilling myself to a degree when it started getting super depressing. And I'd be like, okay, this is just right. And then I started getting into food a little more, and there's still a point where I'm like, okay, where I'll still stop myself because I'm like, this is just going to take forever, and then I don't even know what I'm going to do with this, right? So
Yeah.
yes and no, but I've never gone so far down that I'm like awake all night and then I have the tinfoil hat.
Well, I asked that because I literally red pilled myself so hard about specifically steak, that I lost sleep. Like I lost sleep for probably like 2 weeks. And I'll just back up and say, as I mentioned, I do barbecue competitions sometimes, and I do steak competitions too. I am a certified steak judge for the Steak Cook-Offs Association. I'm in South Florida. They never have them down here, but I'm very into the steak. I'm into the steak world as a journalist, as a sometime competitor, as someone who enjoys eating steak. And let's be honest, I love a juicy AF steak that's highly marbled. And what red pilled me was when I realized what it takes to make a highly marbled steak, I lost a lot of sleep. And so let me go back and say I downloaded the glyphosate report that was done by the Institute for Responsible Technology. And this report was basically like a composite of all the data on glyphosate levels from that IRT did, that Moms Across America did, the Detox Project did, and it was all in one report. And so glyphosate, to back up, is an herbicide. So to share with your listeners, what happens is you have crops. These are the GMO crops. They are Roundup ready. And so what this means is they are bred to survive being sprayed with weed killer. So corn is a GMO crop. Soy is a GMO crop. There's a lot of them, right? Sugar beets, which is used for sugar, is a GMO crop. And so a lot of people think that they're avoiding glyphosate by avoiding GMO crops, but they're wrong, because then even if you're eating something that's not a GMO crop, well, let's just say fruits and vegetables too, they could potentially be sprayed, right? Just to keep all the stuff off, to kill the weeds. And there are other, so this is an herbicide. There are other things too. It's not just glyphosate. You have paraquat. You have chlorpyrifos. I'm not sure. Chlorpyrifos. I'm not sure. But anyway, there's a shitload of stuff out there they're spraying our food with. I'll just leave it at that. But the other thing that people don't realize is that, okay, so even if you're buying organic and you're avoiding GMO, that things like grains are sprayed with glyphosate to dry them out before they go get weighed. So when I read the glyphosate report, it's shocking when you realize all these quote unquote foods that have been touted as healthy all these years are not really healthy at all, because they come with a nice side of chemicals. And so what glyphosate does is not only kill the soil, basically it's like a broad range killer of all things. Antibiotic, it works like that because it kills everything. So it depletes the soil, but it causes cancer. Like there's a bunch of lawsuits around that. So there's that. That's why they think kids are getting leukemia like crazy, because it's in everything. But what it also does to your system is that it kills all your gut bacteria, because it works as like a bleach in your digestive system, just like it does to the soil. But what it also does is it binds with all your nutrients because it's a chelator. So the point is, what people don't realize is things like wheat and which it makes pasta and cookies and blah, 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 everything, right? And oats and legumes, like foods like hummus, are some of the highest in glyphosate foods that you can ingest. So the beauty is that when you eat a high protein diet, you're cutting out all that junk anyway. So there's the argument that eating high protein and cutting out carbs is good for you, period, because you stay satiated, you're getting adequate levels of fat, but it's good for you too because you're cutting out these foods that have been sprayed with cancer-causing chemicals. So there's that. So what really red-pilled me was when I read this glyphosate report, what I realized was that the steak, because who doesn't love a juicy steak? That the steak that I know and love and felt like was really probably one of the healthiest things I could eat as someone eating low carb. And so to back up, what's red-pilled me specifically was when I looked at things like the grains and the alfalfa that went to go feed animals, and it was classified in the report, was in like the hundreds of thousands of parts per billion of glyphosate. Like, let's just say, it might be like, oh, this oatmeal was in the thousands of parts per billion. Like what they were feeding the animals was so high in chemicals that I freaked out. You know what I mean? I was like, holy shit. And I literally did lose weight. Lose sleep. I was like, I gave myself cognitive dissonance because I'm like, what does this mean? You know what I mean? Because then I realized, like the video I sent you today, even the whole system for grading meat is based on marbling. And when you get to understand what a cow eats, for example, a cow is a ruminant and it's meant to eat grass, but it'll never get that marbling eating grass. It's only going to get that marbling eating corn and wheat and soy and the stuff that they feed cows to fatten them up. And that's the stuff that's usually GMO, which means it's high in, it's either GMO or it's not GMO, but it's still sprayed with glyphosate as a desiccant. So I got so red pilled that, and I then, because I started doing research on this and I couldn't find any data to support, like, just to want to understand, like, okay, so knowing this, I wanted to know when a cow ingests large amounts, and cow and all animals ingest large amounts of glyphosate specifically, does that transfer to us? Right? Like, seeing the amounts of chemicals, because let's face it, most people don't give a shit what they're feeding these animals. Like, you know what I mean? When I saw how many chemicals were in the feed, things like alfalfa, the corn, the wheat, the soybeans, all the stuff. And so I just couldn't find a clear answer. And it's also hard to know who to trust these days, right? So I decided to go to the grocery store and ship a bunch of meat to a lab and see what it said for myself. And it was funny because here I am, little me, like food blogger Robyn. A lot of the labs that I called wouldn't even work with me because I wasn't a corporation. And so I finally found Health Research Institute with John Fagan, it's Health Institute International. And he's the one that does all the tests when you see the reports from like moms across America, for example. So I shipped a bunch of meat, conventional and organic, to a lab and had it tested. And actually, this is the first time I've shared really all the details of this, because then when I got the information back, I wasn't sure what to do with it. I was just kind of like, okay, what do I do with this? You know, because it's a lot, and it's kind of like been a journey for me, because I was kind of like, how does this change my relationship, right, with everything, and how do I feel about it now? You know what I mean? So the beauty of this is, what I discovered is, you know, what was interesting is actually so I sent in ground beef. I was like, what do I eat on a weekly basis? I want to know, you know, ground beef, ribeye steaks, conventional versus ground beef, organic, ribeye steaks, organic chicken thighs versus conventional, organic pork chops versus conventional, something like that, right? Like, oh, and bacon. I tested bacon too, because who doesn't eat bacon, period, right? Even as disgusting as we know how pigs are, that's why things that I'm really red pilled about, like I still try to buy bacon from people I find trustworthy. That's like my one thing. So I get the report back, and I was actually really shocked to see that, first of all, the parts per billion and the way they calculate it, the data for glyphosate was very, very low. So I felt relieved. And actually, oddly enough, some of the stuff that was organic rate was higher in glyphosate than the stuff that wasn't organic. So you're like, what the hell? You know? And I mean, honestly, if I had just scheduled a consulting call with John Fagan from HRI, I probably could have saved myself like $1,600 of getting the tests run and all the meat I bought and overnighting it to a lab, because it all got very expensive. But at least I can share this data and help people come to their own conclusions. And so what I discovered when I went through the data with John Fagan was the beauty of glyphosate, at least this one herbicide, not the rest of all the other shit that can be fed to animals and that's sprayed on everything. Glyphosate is water soluble, and thank God for that. So what does that mean? That means that the animals essentially pee it out. So when they are feeding cows and chickens all of this GMO chemical laden feed, at least they're peeing the glyphosate out. Now, it doesn't still take us off the hook to try to not eat meat that at least like we can like kind of quality check it, right? Because then what he told me, and there's not enough money for me to run tests on everything, but the other toxins and the other herbicides and pesticides they can be exposed to, including paraquat, which is known to cause Parkinson's disease, and chlorpyrifos, which is also known to cause Parkinson's and other neurological disorders. And a lot of the other toxins collect in the fat. So whereas glyphosate is water soluble and the animals pee it out, the other toxins, they can accumulate are collected in their fat. So it doesn't totally leave us off the hook. So what this data told me was, even if you're not eating grass-fed beef and your meat is not from probably the more expensive purveyors out there, it's still probably more the animals are better at getting rid of the toxins than if you ate like first generation fruits and vegetables, right? So there's that. But it also told me, like, there's other things you still have to be careful of, right? So I think what came out of all of this for me was that it actually reinstilled in me knowing that even if I go to Costco or my grocery store and buy conventional meat, at least I know that that meat is acting as a filtration system for the toxins versus if I went and ate a bowl of pasta, sorry, that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? There is no filtration system like with kale. Not to even mention all the gut disrupting things that we know. And even kale is actually it's in like the top 5 of the dirty dozen list, right? Of like pesticides. So what it did for me was it reiterated to me like why a protein focused diet is such a good idea, because those animals are really acting as our toxin filtration system. God bless them for it, because we really are living in a world where our food system is so highly toxic that that's probably the easiest way to protect yourself. And so that was the red pilling of Robyn. And I make a joke with my friends that if I had actually started an account like the past 2 years, it might be like Red Pill Robyn. Or I also joke that if I'd started a blog in the past like 2 years, it might be like bitchymommy.com instead of grillgirl.com. But so anyway, that's what I really took me a lot of money to find out, was that actually, and it was a journey, is that honestly meat, a protein focused diet, specifically beef too, I think is the healthiest way you can eat, because it's cutting out all of that junk.
So I love that explanation, because I've actually had conversations with people, because the big thing, especially from the carnivore standpoint, is people are like, you really think we're carnivores? I'm like, okay, first of all, like, you're talking about a classification of animal and I'm talking about a diet. So let's break that apart right now.
Right.
And second of all, no, I don't actually believe that us as a human species are carnivorous animals. Like, I think we're omnivores. And part of it is I have a religious background. I'm religious, and I don't think that we were created to just eat animals. Like, I don't think fruits and vegetables are the devil. But my explanation to somebody.
I just have to interject for a second. If you ever do get deep into this, they say before the Great Flood, a lot of people say that Adam and Eve were vegetarians before the Great Flood. I don't know if you ever heard that. But then the whole environment changed after the flood. So anyway, we could go down, that's a rabbit hole too. But for 2023, absolutely.
Yeah, because and what I tell people without like going way into it is, I honestly think, and I call it the bastardization of modern fruits and vegetables, is what's causing this. And that's why I think the majority of people should try to avoid them as much as possible. Because even if you don't even get into the chemicals and all that stuff sprayed, all you have to do is look at modern fruits versus fruits historically, just to see not only the size, but the sugar content, the fructose content, and all of that. And I'm like, no, we've like so bastardized things. And then of course everybody else is, well, cows, those aren't natural. Like, those have been selectively bred. And I'm like, well, yes, that's true. It's still like an animal that's been bred through, and it is not, so
right.
I love that answer to it, because it provides, a reason as to why fruits and vegetables, because everything's laden with everything.
Totally.
I've never been able to,
like, they've been modified, but they're not genetically modified through CRISPR technology yet.
Right.
Like,
right. Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
even
hello lab grown meat.
Of like, because like I told you, I started writing this clean eating guide that I just kept red pilling myself so much. And it's honestly like they unleash so many toxins into the world every day on their food supply. You honestly can't keep up with it. Like it's like a Wikipedia entry. Like you just need to update it 24/7. But like even what they're doing in these vertical farming operations, it's the wild, wild west in CRISPR technology. And they can basically modify the genes of everything and get away with it and they have no idea what it does to us when we eat it. And nobody cares. You know what I mean? Like that's like back to IRT. They're trying to really get some legislation around like what can you do to our food system, what they're doing to our food system, right? Because it really is like they're frankenfooding everything, and it's scary. Because when you eat GMO, you then are GMO.
Yeah, and it's like, and for people who like, man, people don't want to believe this, like they want to fight you on it, and like, man, there's literally no other explanation. Like, we are the most advanced technology we have ever been. We have the most advanced medical. We have the most information out there, the most nutritional studies, like the most everything. And yet we're the unhealthiest ever. And people will be like, well, no, our life expectancy is longer. And I'm like, yeah, cool. We can keep people alive longer. Like, that's all that is. Like, you now have people who are morbidly obese that live 40 years with morbid obesity because we're able to keep them along. That's not health. I don't care what you say. I don't care. A morbidly obese person that from the age of 30 to the age of 80 is not an indicator of health. Like,
absolutely not.
It's a better indicator of health if you die by natural causes at 60, right? Like,
yeah.
So it's so wild to me, and that's so crazy. Like, yeah, like when you talk about the red pills, like the more information, and I kind of did that myself with nutritional studies. Because when I started digging into nutritional studies, I started realizing how subpar the standards are for a nutritional study. Like, have you seen the study they just came out with, a documentary on Netflix, the twin study?
No, but the problem is I don't trust any of the studies because I'm like, who paid for the study?
So that's it, right? That's exactly it. So you have this twin study that pitted 22 pairs of twins, identical twins, and one of them ate an omnivore diet around animal protein, and the other ate a vegetarian diet. And on the surface, the way they promote it, and this documentary that they came out with, is the vegan twin did better. And so on the surface, you're like, wow, vegan must be healthier. And then you start reading the study and you go, okay, well, it wasn't even an isocaloric diet. The omnivore diet ate more calories. They didn't control for the food entirely. The first 4 weeks was catered, but then snacks were on their own. So you're like, okay. Then they took a break, and then they did another 4 weeks where they all cooked for themselves, but they like gave them guidelines. And you're like, okay, so that's like a very poorly controlled study. You can't make that comparison now. And then they came out with the results. All of the results were within like a standard variance. The vegan population improved on some things, most of which can be explained based on the fact that they lost weight, which could also be explained on the fact that they were on a lower calorie diet. But then some markers got worse. And so you have this conflating study that I go, okay, well, like, this doesn't really say anything. And then you find out that the group that funded it also funded Game Changers, which is highly vegan propaganda.
Oh, geez.
And then you found out that the main guy has been getting paid by Beyond Meat for however long. And you're like, okay, like, how can we even? And this is on Netflix. And so millions of people are going to be exposed to this and go, but the study shows.
And let's call it what it is. It's propaganda.
Yeah. And so that's all nutrition. And now,
but no one knows it, and they take it for the gospel. And that's the problem. And that's why you'll have some dummy on your Instagram, like debating you about like the benefits of veganism. And it's like, give me a break, people. Like,
yeah. And then if you bring that up, they go, oh, so you're just a science denier. And I'm like, here's my problem.
This has so many implications for so many things, but I do have, and I don't know if we have time for it. It might be a whole nother episode, but I could at least tease it.
Okay.
Like I said, I could be Red Pill Robyn. It's been an interesting year, Jason, for me. I had a lot of growth in 2023. I red pilled myself a lot. I grew closer to Jesus. It's been awesome. But when that happens, then you get attacked from the other side. So,
of course.
But the other thing, and this is another reason that a highly meat focused diet, carnivore, keto, animal based, whatever works for you, but specifically mainly meat is healthier, is because of nanotech. And I can specifically tell you, I did the research on this because this is another thing I red pilled myself on, because I detoxed some very weird stuff out of my body and I wasn't sure what it was. And in an effort to understand what it was that I pulled out, I thought they were what was called a Morgellon. If you've ever heard of what's called Morgellons disease, it's almost like a wiry, fibrous type thing you can pull out of your body. And anyway, what I figured out what it was, I discovered who was kind of at the forefront of understanding what it was, is a guy named Tony Pantalleresco. He's actually an herbalist. His YouTube channel is called Herbs Plus Beadworks because he used to own he is an herbalist. He used to own a store that did like essential oils. And he is like a mad scientist, honestly. He's really good at like home remedies and stuff like that. He thought he had Lyme's disease, and what he realized he had instead was nano poisoning. Because the point is, and I'll try to sum this up because I know you'll probably want to cut your podcast into about an hour, is when they spray, well, let me back up and say, when they tell us that transhumanism is the future, what they don't tell us is that we already are transhuman to some degree based on the amount of pollution in our environment and the food system. So when they spray barium and aluminum and all the other stuff in a chemtrail, what they also spray is smart dust. And this smart dust gets into our food supply. So especially things that don't have an outer peel, like berries and apples and things like that, they're covered in nanotech. This stuff is basically, and if you start doing some research and digging in, you'll see like there's a lot of doctors out there that are now starting to look at all these different things under a microscope. Nanotech is in everything. It's in over-the-counter drugs. It's in Botox. It's in, which is a bummer for me because that was like the one last unhealthy thing I was still doing. Trying to, I don't want to look 45. You know what I mean? I have a very expressive face. It's a major bummer for me to find that out. But so in the nano, so when they talk about Internet of Things, it's Internet of Body. If you see where I'm saying, and like we're all digitally tied into everything. It ties into the hive mind, all that stuff. And so the stuff that's going to have the highest level of nano is stuff that's grown out in a field. They can get sprayed on, stuff like wheat, stuff like fruit and veggies, stuff that's not grown in, like, even if you can grow stuff in your own indoor greenhouse, right? In which I'm not saying is easy to do, but I'm just saying the point is animals are going to be that double filtration system, right? From even things like nano, which we're all accumulating in our body. So that's my second red pill. And I can even share, if anyone wants to know, I can show people what it looks like if you pull it out of your body and what it looks like. But it's self-assembling circuitry, basically. And DARPA's had this stuff going back 20, 30 years in their documentation. So you can fact check me. I'm not crazy. But that's the other reason, even if you talk to Tony Pantalleresco, who is at the forefront of all the research on this stuff, and ask him what he eats a lot of meat, a few maybe choice fruits, something like an orange, something in a that has its peel that can be removed, right? Because again, it's all the toxins. So now it's not just the herbicides and the pesticides. Now it's the stuff they're spraying into the air onto all these things. So truly, you are what you eat. And I don't want to be Internet of Bodies. Screw those people. And there are ways to detox that out. And that's maybe for another podcast. But so my point is, now more than ever, meat is your safest thing to eat because of the nature of the reality that we live in. Does it mean that I don't ever eat fruit? No. But I definitely, knowing what I know now, I'm kind of like, do I even need a salad? No. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because I'm not strict carnivore. I really kind of more am animal based. But knowing what is in your food supply really makes you think twice about even quote unquote, a healthy fruit or vegetable.
Do you want to know what the title of the documentary is?
Yes,
That
I would love
vegan
it.
documentary? You just said it. You are
What?
what you eat. That's literally what it is.
Well, and what I just said would, to prove and to move to just build on that, there's an agenda behind all the things they push, right?
Oh, for sure.
And knowing what I just shared with you guys, how contaminated the food is, that's part of their agenda. Like, sick people are way easier to control. The more brain cells they can kill on us, we're easier to control. So luckily we still have enough brain cells to see through all the crap out there, right? But a lot of people don't, and that's sad. So hopefully, the nature of red pilling, I red pilled myself, may have red pilled some people on this podcast, but truly you are what you eat. And I'd rather be a cow than a monocrop piece of soy any day. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's a huge thing that I'm, without even red pilling myself, without even going down a bunch of these rabbit holes, my stance is literally, if there is a world government organization that is promoting something, I am probably going to do the opposite.
Amen.
So when the WHO comes out and says, and for anybody who doesn't think that's a government organization, like, let's be real,
They all
when
are.
the WHO comes out and says we need to eat plants, we need to be plant-based for the planet, like, you have this group of people who consider themselves progressive and like breaking away from the propaganda and busting the mold, going, yay, let's do it. And I'm like, how do we not see the irony here? How do we not see this? Like,
I know.
in no way, shape, or form will I ever listen to the WHO and go, you know what? That's a fantastic idea. I should eat more fruits and vegetables. And you know what? Why don't you put a peel on it? That sounds lovely. Like,
right.
just,
well, and they don't realize, well, they do realize that people don't do their research. They don't know that even organic, quote unquote, fruits and vegetables, first of all, nothing's truly organic just based on what I just told you, because of all the stuff they spray on us every day, including our crops. But if you drive a truck across country lines, it, by law, I think it's called the Codex. There's a name to it, but they have to put. Let's say you drove something from Canada to the U.S. And it's a truck full of organic lettuce or whatever. They, by law, have to put a pesticide in that truck because there's laws about bringing over anything from Canada to the U.S. or vice versa. So nothing really is truly organic.
and
Unfortunately,
people believe that. They go, it's organic, it's not sprayed with any herbicides or pesticides. I'm like, that's not what organic means. Like, that doesn't mean that they're not using something that is still going to get on your food. Like, test all the food you go buy. Like, test all the food and we'll see. But
it's true.
They don't want to do that, right? And again, that's like something we could go on for years and years and years and years. So, without red pilling even more, the typical person who's seen this, because that's the one thing I feel blessed with, especially on Twitter. Instagram, like, I feel like I've built like some strong connections on Instagram, but Instagram like does not like to improve my reach.
It doesn't want to improve anyone's reach.
Oh, geez, it's
brutal.
brutal.
They try harder because everyone's like, maybe I should go to TikTok instead.
But my Twitter has been like exponentially better. And so I get a lot of people who are on the fence, right? I still have a lot of carnivore people, a lot of keto people, but a lot of people who are like, man, I'm like looking into this. How does that person hear all of this information? Like, what are simple steps that they can do to at least improve their situation? Because if somebody who's just starting out, like, takes all of this in, like, they either have to be independently wealthy or they have to not eat anything for like the rest of their lives if they really want to go from like point A to point B. So
Yeah.
what are a couple steps that somebody can do that's not going to kill them in order to just improve what it is that they're doing?
I'd say read your labels. That's first and foremost, right? Know where your food comes from. Label reading's a huge one. Like, and I continue to even red pill myself. Sometimes you're in a hurry and you grab something, you're like, shit. And then you get home, you're like, I didn't mean to buy this. So that's a big one. I think even just cutting seed oils out is such a huge one, and people don't realize like it's in literally everything. Even if you're just eating a meat focused diet and it's not organic and it's just conventional, eating a grilled piece of meat um with a fruit or veg that is, I would say for the fruit or veg, try organic if you can, or like do something like read the dirty dozen list so that you know when you buy vegetables, you know which ones matter to be organic and not. And that's how you save yourself money. For example, an avocado, I'm not going to buy an organic avocado because it's in a peel. I can take the peel off. Or like a banana. I'm not going to buy an organic banana, but like and I know it's a carnivore. I'm just saying for the average person who's like on the fence. Sure. But something like lettuces or, just read your dirty dozen list because it's going to tell you this stuff top to like bottom, what you definitely need to be buying organic versus not. So you're not wasting money. And, just do the best you can. Honestly, I think half of it is like if you just cut out processed food, no matter what diet you're on, you're automatically removing all of these chemicals from your body that are creating this toxic sludge that are going to do nothing but, put you on a faster path to cancer or some kind of sickness, right? So, like for me, in my applicable daily life, my kid wants to go hit the racetrack on the way home from school. And I think half of it is like because he wants to see his friends after school and that's where they go, and I'm like, no, there is not one single thing you can eat at racetrack. And you know what I mean? I'm like, there's nothing, not even the packet of nuts. It's still got weird stuff in it. You know what I mean? That's like the one thing I'm like, and he wants to get a Gatorade. And I'm like, no, there's food dyes in that. Like, we're not doing it. So like, even if you can just do like change your habits and be like, no, instead of going to racetrack, we're going to go home and make a turkey sandwich, and it's like, you can control what you can control. So like little things like that. I think for a lot of people, just planning ahead, is a big one. Like, in carnivore and keto, meal prepping is big. Why? Because like it's that way you're not leaving yourself in a situation where you have to be at McDonald's pulling the bun off the burger, which let's face it, that anything that comes from McDonald's is disgusting. So you know what I mean? So we don't even know if that's real meat. Like, let's just be honest. So like just putting a little planning is gonna save you time and money, right? Like versus like eating out. Like I know, like so I'd say those are little things you can do. Like even if you're not buying organic, organic meat, the stuff like, well, if you're eating keto or carnivore and you're not eating all those wheats and grains and cookies and crackers and all that stuff, which is loaded in all those chemicals, then that's half the battle right there. Like you're already doing yourself a favor, not to mention all the sugar, like even if it's just like, I really want some sugar. Gosh, I really have a sugar craving. Like, okay, have some stevia sweetened chocolate or have a date, not like a bowl of ice cream. You know what I mean? Like, not that ice cream can be bad, but let's face it, any low sugar ice cream that you buy at the store is probably still going to have weird ingredients in it. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that a lot of that too is like when you get to the store, a lot of stuff marketed for the keto diet or for certain diets. Again, it's being marketed, it's processed, it's still going to be loaded in chemicals. So, like if you really need you need something sweet for dessert, you're still better off having a date than you are like probably keto ice cream, that might have like carrageenan and fillers and emulsifiers and all kinds of weird stuff that you don't know what that does to your body, that could disrupt your gut. So I think a lot of it is just cut out the junk and you're already ahead of the curve. And you can do that on any diet. In fact, it might save you money if you're on the kind of lifestyle where you're eating out all the time and you are eating a lot of junk. And I think the other things that people don't realize is how many extra empty calories you can get from drinking all the things, drinking beverages, drinking soda, drinking alcohol. That's always been a tough one for me. I'm not going to lie. I actually just recently quit drinking pretty regularly. Like, and now I'm like, okay, maybe on special occasions I'll drink. And I just had like literally I come to Jesus with myself. But not to mention when you dig into the amount of chemicals in things like wine and beer, which are made from stuff that's sprayed, like the amount of chemicals and how unregulated those industries are, but also like soda and Gatorade, like none of that stuff's healthy for you. So like cutting that out, maybe you'll save yourself money by just being like, I'm going to make myself some herbal tea with some stevia instead of this quote unquote energy drink or this, Propel or Gatorade, which is terrible for you and it's laden in chemicals. So those are my tips. That was not long winded, but I think the case in point is if you can't pronounce it and you don't know what it is, your body probably doesn't either, and get rid of it.
Exactly. Yes. And yeah, I'm going to have you on again because I feel like we're going to have a red pill rabbit hole episode.
Go for it.
Yeah, so if anybody's listening, definitely go give Robyn a follow. Like I said, I originally started following her just for the grill content, and then we talked a little bit. We talked about, I think you put me onto a sauce, which I haven't got yet, but, different barbecue sauces and seasonings. And, some people hardcore on the carnivore might avoid that altogether, but there's definitely the segment of population that is trying to bridge the gap. And so Robyn has a ton of great ideas, great products, which, like she said, she has a good idea where they come from and how they're made. And, it's companies that she feels comfortable working with. So I believe your website is grillgirl.com.
You got it. Yeah, grillgirl.com. And yeah.
And your social media handles are Grill Girl as well?
So on my social media handles, it's Grill Girl Robyn with a Y. And, I'm here to help everybody in their journey. I realize no one's perfect. But honestly, I think knowing the level of toxicity in the food supply makes it that much easier to cut the junk out, right? Like once you realize only is it bad for you, like from a caloric perspective, but like literally what's in it could kill you. Like, it's like, oh, geez, wow. Right?
Yeah, it makes it a whole lot easier. So I thank everybody for tuning in. Go give her a follow. I will tag her on the respective platforms that I post this on. And thank you guys very much for tuning in.